righty. Well, Anna, welcome to the Act Social podcast. We are so grateful to have you on. You have quite the story for people, and you also have quite the gift as well that the Lord has blessed you with. And we are just so grateful to have you on to hear your story and to kind of get to know Anna Moore Bradfield a little bit deeper. And I think a good place to start. And this kind of took me by surprise. And so I think this is kind of a good area to begin this. But you gave your life to Christ at 4 years old. Anna, I wasn't even coherent at 4 years old. Please walk me through kind of your mindset at such a young age and kind of the journey that you started walking so early on with the Lord.
Well, Ryan, thanks for that question and thanks for having me here. I've been looking forward to this time with you for quite a while and thinking back to those early days. In fact, my mom used to tease me. She used to say, "You don't use that as your event for coming to Christ, do you? Because you were so young." But I do because, first of all, I was in a family I was the fifth kid out of six kids total. So at that time, my little sister hadn't been born yet, so I was the baby of the family. But my mom and dad had given their lives to Christ before I was ever born. So I know some of my older siblings have memories of my parents before they were Christians. But my very earliest memories of both my mom and my dad were being in the church, serving the Lord very faithfully, having that relationship with God that was consistent, whether they were in church, whether they were in the grocery store, whether they were at work, whether they were talking to the neighbor, whether they were at home. They were Christ followers. So it was very natural for me to be involved in church. I'm kind of an overachiever. So I was the kid in Sunday school or in children's church who was trying to memorize the Bible verses so that I could get a bracelet with the 10 Commandments on it and all that kind of stuff. That was just me. Yeah. But so when we were in church and it was during a revival service, and I wasn't so saintly that I was listening to every word that was being said. My mom had given me some paper to draw on. So I was a big drawer and a big doodler. And I just, in the middle of this revival service, I don't know that I'd ever seen this before. I had seen people go up front, go to the altar to pray. Yeah. But I had never seen one person after another. And so it gave me pause as a little kid. And they were not only going up to the altar, but they were crying and people were praying over them. And once they got there and had an opportunity to pray, the relief and the joy and the tears of joy, and I just was watching this as a little kid and saying, what is this all about? I had been in the church my whole life, but I didn't understand what was happening to these people.
Right.
So I just, went to my mom and I said, what's happening right now? And she said, they're going to the altar because they want Jesus in their lives. And as a young kid, that's when it hit me. I had never asked Jesus into my heart and into my life. So I just asked my mom if she would help me with that. I didn't want to go up front, but will you help me right here, right where we are? And so she helped me. She prayed, the prayer of salvation in a way that a 4-year-old child could understand, helped me through that, helped me understand what that meant. And that was the beginning of my journey with Jesus.
Wow. So just out of curiosity, because normally, right, if a parent or parents bring their kids to church, right, maybe they'll bring them to the kids section and, you do your thing over there and then we'll go to the adult room and then we'll meet you after kind of thing. But she would bring you into the main room and have you witness these things and these beautiful moments.
Absolutely. I mean, there were plenty of times that I was in children's church and that kind of thing. But I think for revival services, I think probably the church just said, you know what, we need our children with us during this. And the people who would normally be part of leading the children, they need to be part of this. So let's just all be together. And that's, I think, why I was in that room at that time.
Wow. Now let me ask you this, just for for current parents right now with younger children and things like that, would you recommend them to be in like that main room with them? Do you think there's a benefit to having your kids around such powerful moments like that?
I absolutely do. I think it's not only important for the child, but I think it's important for every adult attendee of that service to see the children and to realize it's real for me, but it can be real for them. And it's just I can remember services really recently where during the worship part of the service or the music part of the service, these children who are with their parents, but when the music starts, they want to be in the aisles. They want to be worshiping, in their own beautiful, unique way. And I have, I probably kind of like worried parents or whatever, but I would take videos of this because it was so inspirational to me to see these children with complete childlike faith, with complete abandon, worshiping Jesus in their own special and unique ways. So yes, I absolutely believe in that multi-generational worship experience. I think it's beautiful.
Wow. That is just, that's so powerful. And let alone does it equip, of course, you and, children who are, confronted with this at such a young age. It equips them with a level of protection, with a level of safety that as they go through their childhood, their maybe the bullying years, the things like that, it equips them with what you need to get through it, but also prepares you for what you also need as you grow up and become an adult and go through more and more and more life experience as well.
Yep,
what a beautiful thing to be introduced to so early on, and it's quite powerful for me to see how God chooses certain children, at a younger age. And then some of them, maybe as they develop, he chooses them at 10 or some at 14, some at 15. And, and sometimes he's using 4-year-olds even like you to inspire a 35-year-old. 35-year-olds in church watching you like, wow, it's just in just this beautiful circle of God's children and how we're all interconnected is just so inspiring and just beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I love it. Wow.
I agree.
That is just wonderful. So of course you mentioned coming to Christ at a young age, and you said that helped you a lot because it gave you a guiding light in your life, as we mentioned, because life can really throw a lot at you. What were some of these darker moments that you had to go through, that you had to lean in on this guiding light?
Yeah, and I'll try to encapsulate the story and make it fairly quick, but I really did have what I would consider a pretty idyllic childhood. I had a wonderful community. Church community was wonderful. I know that there were bad things that happened in town, but it didn't happen to me, and I didn't see it. I didn't see it in my friends. I didn't see it, walking around. I felt so safe in my town. And I always said that if I ever wrote a memoir about my hometown, I would call it Growing Up in Mayberry. And Mayberry may not, that might not mean anything to you, but anybody my age and older, they'll remember the Andy Griffith shows and this town Mayberry that he grew up in. And so I always thought of my town like that. Yeah. And I had chosen a Christian college to go to. And through the course of our situation, I ended up transferring to another Christian college. And I'll date myself again, but when I was a child of the 80s, there was this show on TV called Family Ties. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that, or if you've ever, you should ask your parents about it. If your parents are around, ask them, because they'll remember the show. They'll remember the characters of the show. And there was this one guy on the show, and his name on the show was Alex P. Keaton. In real life, it was Michael J. Fox. So if you know who he is, that kind of like started his career. But his character on the show was a very put together, yuppie kind of a ultra conservative kind of a kid. I mean, he wore ties all the time. His heroes were Richard Nixon and, Ronald Reagan, and his parents were flower children. They were children of the hippie generation. Yep. And so there was this natural conflict, I guess, in the story. And I used to love that show, and everybody in my generation loved that show and watched it week after week. Well, when I transferred into this new college, I met a guy who was so similar in looks to Alex P. Keaton. It was uncanny. And his personality seemed to be very similar. So it seemed to be very squeaky clean. And his denomination that he had grown up with was the same as mine. And so we had a lot of things in common. But one of the things that we didn't have in common was he was pretty involved in pornography. And I didn't realize it right away. But as our dating relationship went on, there was a lot of pressure in that relationship. And I would love to say that I was able to thwart off every one of those types of temptations, and I was able to just stand my ground and, shine that light that Jesus really had put into me. But what I found is that I was a long way away from home to go to this college, and didn't really know my roommates very well. We literally I met this guy the very first weekend I was at school. So I barely knew my suite mates in college, and they all seemed to be such good Christian girls that the fact that I was starting to be led down this path that I knew I shouldn't be on, but yet who do I talk to about this? I can't really talk to my parents. What would they think of me? What would my roommates think of me? I really didn't feel like I had anyone. And so as much as I would love to say that I did the right thing, I went down this path that I never should have been on, that I was not called to be on. I ultimately married this person, and we were married for years. And so you can imagine if our dating relationship started this way, kind of like where our path eventually led. And we were married for a number of years, and all this shame, all of this stuff that I've been internalizing year after year after year. And I finally got up the nerve to talk to one of my sisters about it. And when I talked to her about it, she said, I really feel like we need to talk to the whole family about this, because you're in a lot of mud and mire that I so desperately want to get you out of, but I want to make sure that you've got the counsel that you need. So she told the family in a very general roundabout way. She knew all the details, but my family knew just the general details. And my family was very loving, very supportive throughout that entire time. And they said, you know what? You have tried so hard to do this on your own. And he has tried so hard to get out of this pit that he's in. And clearly there needs to be some help here. And there needs to be accountability. There needs to be counseling, all this kind of stuff. So I agreed, and we kind of put together an action plan on how I would talk to him. He wasn't with me at the time. It happened to be Christmas, but he was still back at home, and I had come up to Michigan, which is where my whole family was from, with our kids. And so I went ahead and called him and prayed about it ahead of time. I really wanted to say the right things, wanted to say it the right way and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line was, this kind of lifestyle, I'm not going to be a part of it anymore. And we really need to take a different step in life. Yeah. And although I was doing what the Lord wanted me to do, I was sure of it. His response blew me out of the water, because his response was basically sayonara. I've been miserable for years with you. I don't want to be a part of a relationship with you anymore. And I'm glad you said something, because this is my excuse to bail. So our marriage ended then.
Wow.
So that was a really
waiting on your cue. Like God was waiting for you to get to that point to say something.
Yeah. But where I thought God would restore the relationship, the exact opposite happened.
Yeah, the restoring was in the separation.
Yeah.
You know, in a way. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but I was reeling, like I was just, you could have blown me over with a feather. I was just like, what? Because I thought, wait a minute. I have been the one in the wrong here the whole time.
Right.
Or been the one that's been wronged.
Yeah.
And you've been the one that's been the kind of like introducer of all this stuff. And now that I'm bringing it to light, you're saying, I'm out of here. No, that I never expected that to happen. Yeah. So it was such a hurtful time. It was such a hurtful time.
Was this your first love? Is this your first love?
Well, it was my first marriage for sure. I would say that maybe I was in love with somebody else before that, but definitely it was, the person that I had pledged my life to.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. And you said something just kind of in that story too that kind of struck me a little bit, which was you moved away and you felt distant from the people who were once around you.
Yes.
But you knew in order to get back, because you felt something was wrong, something was off, something was not going maybe the way that it should be going. But you knew in order to get back that you needed to be open, that you needed to be honest, that you needed to be transparent with the people who care for you and the people who are around you. And I think that's something just for the people watching this. Always keep in mind that, one, you're never alone. There's many times of deceit that we can do it to ourselves. Maybe other people do it to us, but we can make ourselves feel like we're in this alone, like we're stuck, like we're going down this path that's leading to darkness and there's no way off the path, and oftentimes it can feel like that. It can feel like we're just surrounded by just darkness. And if you truly just open your eyes, though, you'll begin to realize that there's actually so much light around you, whether that's through the Lord, whether that's through, your family, your friends, the people who love you, the people who care for you. There's so much light around you, and that it's in your darkest moments that the evil one, the devil, Satan, whatever you want to call him, makes you feel like there's not light when there really is.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So just something to really drive home for the viewers is, there's always a light. There's always a light that you can find, and it's never too dark for there to be a light that comes in. So.
Yeah, my daughter says, she uses a little phrase. She says, it's never too late to make the next right choice.
Wow.
And I think that's appropriate here. And I was just so glad, although it was so hurtful what happened and what the outcome was, and it didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. At the same time, knowing that I had come clean, I guess, with these demons of my past, and been able to tell someone about it so that I could begin to see that light again.
Wow.
Was profound.
Wow. Oh, I love it. Well, let's segue into your creative specialty. How about that? You, Anna, write biblical fiction. Now, for someone who doesn't know what that might entail, explain kind of your writing and your goal for writing what you write and for creating the series that you have created.
Yeah, I appreciate that question so much. I've always been kind of a wrestler and a seeker. And I think probably a lot of us could say that. And I think a lot of times when we open up the Bible and we see this story, there's certain parts of it that don't quite make sense to us. And we want to understand it, but we're just not sure of the full 360 degree picture. We don't have the full panoramic view. We might just get a snapshot of that moment in time. And so my mind has always gone to, I just really want to reconcile those things that don't quite make sense. I know it's the Word of God. I know it is God inspired. I know that God would never put any falsehood in His Word. But I just want to really fully understand it so that I can understand how it applies to my life. I don't think God told us all these stories just because they made for good print on the page. I think He told us these stories because we can find nuggets of truth that we can apply to our own lives. So if I can do that with my biblical fiction and fill in the spaces on that page that are not actually written in the Word without contradicting what is in the Word, then I believe that that puts that flesh on the bone that I've always longed to see as a seeker.
Yeah. Like fill in the gaps. Yep. Absolutely. Well, let alone, God used His children to write the Bible. Well, Anna, you are one of God's children. So if God were to ever add more value to the world through such a way, He would do it through His children. And He would do it through these ways. So, wow, that's beautiful. And what is your series called?
It's called The Lambswool Chronicles.
Okay.
And the reason I called it that is because it's about the house of David. And you can't think of David without thinking of his time as a shepherd. And so Lambswool Chronicles.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense. Oh, that's awesome. And where in your life, I guess, did this creative journey start for you? Was it after that first marriage? Was it before? Or have you always had this creative gene to you? And then maybe it was just, you did different sort of projects before and then went to this. Like, how does that journey look for you?
I have always wanted to write. And I say that I wanted to write even before I could write. Like, I did not know what the alphabet was. So way back in those preschool years, I didn't know what the alphabet was. I didn't know what all those loopy loops were in the books, but I knew that there were pictures and those loopy loops explained what the pictures were. So from my earliest ages, I remember putting together books. The very first thing that I ever quote unquote published, I was in second grade. And I had developed a bunch of poems, which I wish I still had this, but I don't. But I put together all these poems. And they would probably sound like nonsense today. But my mom was impressed enough that she said, "Would you like me to make those into a book?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Oh, I can make a cover. I can get out my sewing machine. I can do embroidery on material, and I'll put together a cover for you." Yeah. And so I just remember being so impressed with what she was able to do with my writing. And I took it to school for show and tell. And the teacher wanted to show it to all the other teachers, and they were reading it into their class. And then in third grade, I remember creating a play, and I cast my entire class, and we did the play both during the day for the kids at school, and then we also did it in the evening for all the parents. So from my earliest age, I was writing. Yeah.
Well, I think we kind of know a little glimpse of where you're getting the creative gene. Your mom's creating the book from scratch.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Goodness. Wow. So I'm going to go on a limb and say that you were definitely a big reader too then?
I was a big reader. And I just have always loved stories. I actually really love to be read too. Really? I can remember teachers in school. I remember one teacher in particular, my fifth grade teacher, would pull out book after book, and we would do it as part of our curriculum. And it was my absolute favorite part of the day when she would read to us. And I was always so disappointed when the time would end. She would read to us for 20 minutes, a half an hour. And it wasn't every day, but it was everywhere that she could, squeeze it in. And that was like one of my favorite memories from school.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. What are your thoughts on kind of where reading is going nowadays, where you have a lot more audiobooks, the podcasting, things like that, where maybe you don't see as high of a production of books nowadays? What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on that when it comes to intaking God's word? Do you feel a strong pull that, you should try and only read from the Bible when you're intaking God's word? Or do you feel as you can listen to an audio version of a Bible, or you could, read through your phone of the Bible, and you feel like you can still get that same effect? What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly think that, number one, the way that we first received stories were auditorially. If you think about it, that's the way that we have always received stories, is through the audio. So whether it be watching a play, whether it be listening to a monologue, whether it be having someone read it to us, that's how we always started. I think for each person, their preference is going to be different. I have certain people in my life who just absolutely love their Kindle, or however it is that they read things digitally. Yeah. That's how they love to read. I have other people in my life who must have a paper because they want to feel that book. I have people like that. And then I have people, lots and lots and lots of people, and I think you're right. I think it's growing. Either they love the visual, they love the video, or they love the audio, whether it be podcasting or listening to an audiobook. I recently listened to an author who writes a lot of YA fiction, so young adult fiction. And he has such a huge draw with his audio. He makes so much more money from his audio than he does from his ebook. Whereas most of us authors, our ebooks are where most of our revenue come from. But in his case, he writes to that young reader, and the young reader is listening to his book while they're out running, or while they're running errands, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Okay, I get that. Yeah, because I'm personally more of a physical book. I prefer to have a physical copy in my hand. I feel it's definitely big for like distractions, like, when I'm on my phone and there's notifications coming through, or even I think it's that feeling of every time, at least for me, when I pick up my phone, I'm picking up my phone to respond to a message, or to call someone back, or to post something on social media, or to do something. And so it feels a little strange for me to pick up my phone and to open up the Bible and to not do anything but to sit and just read. Yeah. So something like that feels a little strange to me. So I prefer more to go on that physical copy. It allows me to immerse myself a little bit better, a little bit easier. But I definitely can see those benefits to, if you're out on a run, or maybe if you're more of just an audio learner, or an audio connoisseur, it's just a little bit better for you. So I definitely get that. Very, very interesting. Okay. Well, let's see here. We also I have a few good ones here for you.
You gave me some of the questions ahead of time, and I was so impressed.
I want to be just a little mindful with time, but I definitely have a lot of stuff I want to ask you about here. So let's go into this. This is very interesting to me, because we kind of got a little bit of your past, right? You gave your life at such a young age, and then you kind of got into writing. You went through, that little rough spurt with your first marriage. What does your personal walk with Jesus look like today? What are some of the things that you do today to keep yourself rooted? And what are some of those lessons that you learned from past versions of yourself that allowed you to do things a little bit better today than maybe how you first started off with going about it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I feel like I can go in so many different avenues there. But I can tell you how I start the day. The very first thing that I think of is God every single day. And it's a habit that I've developed that I think would probably be easy to get out of the habit. I never want to get out of the habit. And that is just starting every day with thanksgiving to God. There's always something to be thankful for. Just the fact that he's given me another morning is something to be thankful for. But I go through a list of things to be thankful for. As the Lord puts people in my mind, I pray for them. If I know in particular what's going on with them, I'll pray for that thing. But otherwise, I just am thanking God for the person that he's put on my mind, or just asking that the Lord would be with them in a special way, and then dedicating that day to him. That puts me in the right frame of mind for the rest of the day. And when those times come up that feel challenging for one reason or another, maybe I've been cut off in traffic, or maybe I've just received some bad news about something, or I run into a really high stress situation, knowing that I've dedicated my day to God already puts me in that frame of mind that I need to be in. I'm big too on visualization. So when I have screwed up in one way or another, I envision myself crawling into the lap of God, using his robes almost like a ladder to climb back into his lap and show him the mess that I've made. Open my hands and show him the mess that I've made, and allow him to just comfort me through that and take it from me. Take it from me. I was on a Bible study earlier today that we were talking about how difficult it is sometimes to hand things over to God. And I said, the thing that makes it hard is that when we put it in his hands, we have to let go. He won't play a tug of war with us. It's right. Either you're giving it to me or you're not. And it's so scary to let it go. And at the same time, there is no one in life that wants our best more than our Abba Father. So, we can see it in hindsight where, why didn't I just give that to him a long time ago? Because when I do, he's going to make something beautiful out of it. No matter how ugly it is to start with, he's going to make something beautiful out of it. But sometimes it's just so hard to let go. So that visualization, means a lot to me. I know that just that story that I told you earlier on, which was kind of an ugly story, although I told my sister about it way back when, once just the tragedy of it had been resolved in my life, I wanted to hide it away again, because how can I continue to talk about this kind of thing? And so for years, I hid it away. Nobody knew anything about it. But it was really through my podcast that I started about 1.5 years ago that the Lord began to say, you're asking all these other people to share their stories. You've got a story that you need to share. And I was scared to death to tell this story on my podcast. And it took several episodes to get the whole thing out. But what I found through that process is, as I brought the shame to life, the shame that I had carried around dissolved. The Lord helped me shake it off, because it wasn't him that was heaping the shame on me. It was my own self. It was my own lack of will, or whatever the case may be, to forgive myself. I felt like it was so bad that I wasn't worthy of that forgiveness, where Jesus died for that forgiveness. Exactly. And so what was I saying about his gift that I wasn't accepting that forgiveness? And it was really through that process of telling my story on the podcast that the Lord helped me shake myself free of the shame of my past. So that's been a huge difference that's occurred to me over the last 1.5 years or so.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And it's almost like what we just talked about with the darkness and light, how you can go through these periods where it just feels like just so dark. You're just surrounded by darkness. But then in reality, it's not the truth. It's like he's always been there for you. He's always, forgiven you. His light has always been extended out to you.
And he's not done with you. No matter what it is, whoever's listening to this right now or watching this, no matter what it is you have done, Jesus' blood can cleanse you. And he can use that stain that you see in your life that he has now expunged because you've accepted his forgiveness. He can use that to make your life more beautiful, maybe even than it would have been without that stain in your life.
Oh, amen. 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 Wow. Oh, I so agree. I just love it. Wow. And even just a little bit back to that control, because I feel that so heavily sometimes, wanting to control certain outcomes and control the timing of certain things. And so many times am I reminded that I do not know at all what is best for my life. I do not know anything. And that what I am dealing with these thoughts of thinking I do know what's best, is being a creature of control and being a creature of habit. And that's basically what humans are. We're creatures of habit. So yes. We get stuck in our own ways of doing these things. And when God comes along, or maybe we read the Bible and we see God's ways, right? And he comes along and he's like, no, you shouldn't do it that way. We don't like that. we feel like we know what's best. No, we want to do it this way. No, it's best if it happens that way on this timing. And it's like, if you just put your hands down,
right,
and if you just give it up to him, you will see blessings beyond blessings. Yeah. And your whole life will shift in ways that you could have never even imagined. You could never even fathomed. And your life will change like that. Mm-hmm. Just because you admitted that you don't know what's best.
Right. And you've put your hand in the hand of the one who does.
Yeah. Just going.
So often we read in Scripture about walking in the Spirit and walking in the flesh.
Yeah.
And I think as humans, a lot of times we hear walking in the flesh and we think, we want to just totally repel that, that's totally understandable. Sometimes I switch the language a little bit in my mind and I think of natural versus supernatural. So if natural is walking in the flesh, supernatural is walking in the Spirit. And for whatever reason, that flip of the words, of the synonyms, it makes wanting to walk in the supernatural so exciting to me. Whereas, using the terms walk in the flesh, walk in the Spirit, it feels a little bit like, it feels harder for whatever reason. Yeah. But if I switch that language to natural versus supernatural, there's a whole excitement around that and expectancy, and it makes me want to do that supernatural thing by letting God lead me.
Yeah, wow. It's so true, though. It's so true. It's a whole different way of living. It really is. And it becomes easier the more you walk the path. Mm-hmm. As you walk the path will unfold, for you. So, and then you mentioned another beautiful thing that kind of stuck in my mind as well, and that's about prayer. And prayer is extremely powerful, as you would know. And not only just, of course, praying when you wake up, praying before bed, but praying throughout the day and being intentional with your prayer is very smart. When someone comes on your mind, and whether it's a family, a friend, maybe it's someone you haven't talked to in a while, when they come into your mind, that is your sign to pray for them. You don't have to know the reason why. You don't have to know the specifics. You pray for their protection. You pray for their guidance, for their love, and for covering over their life. That is your sign, and that is the best way to use prayer and to help the people around you and the people that you care about in your life through that spiritual deliverance. And I cannot urge that enough to people who have that relationship with the Lord is, please just pray more because your prayers are so powerful. Right. And you don't realize, it is direct communication to the Lord.
Yes.
It gives me chills even just saying that, but it's direct. It's direct to him, and he hears every word, every tone, and every word that you pray.
And think about how much of a gentleman God is. What if he's just waiting on you to ask?
Yeah.
What are you not experiencing in life because you simply haven't asked him for it yet?
Right. Yeah.
And when you were bringing up people who might come to mind, what if it's an enemy that comes to your mind? Yeah. Think about praying for that person that in the natural, in the flesh, you really don't want anything great to happen to them. But that person is also somebody who God is crazy about. Yeah. And so if you can hand that person over to God and say, you know what, God, I've tried everything that I can to keep this person out of my life, but you've brought him to my mind, and I ask for blessings on his life today. One of the things that Joyce Meyer says is when you ask someone to be blessed, you're not necessarily asking that they get a new car, that they, get some big promotion at work or whatever the case may be. You're asking for enlightenment on their life. So, man, think about that. You're asking God to bless them. You're asking God to reveal himself to him in a way that maybe they've never seen before. And all of a sudden, what if one day they're no longer an enemy? What if one day they're now your brother?
Oh, right. And don't hold on to their dirt when you have your own.
Right.
You're far from perfect as well.
Yep.
And I love that in the Bible. It's you don't ever put yourself above or below any other human. You're no better and you're no worse at all. Yeah. Wow. Love it. I absolutely love it. Everything that we just talked about, from faith to leadership and to standing up for something greater than yourself, are all values that our current sponsor for today holds, which is Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is going across campuses, cities, and local communities, teaching young people how to stand up for their beliefs and themselves and their God, and how to walk this journey of faith in such a hectic world. If you or someone could be benefited from Turning Point USA, feel free to check them out today at tpusa.com. Now let's get back to the good stuff. Let's get into your podcast. I want to get a little bit more into it. Like I said, I kind of covered a little bit of it personally on my own time.
Nice.
But I'd like to kind of dive a little bit more in for the audience and people like that. So your podcast is called God's Power Stories. And what was your idea of, why you wanted to start that podcast and kind of the direction you wanted to take it? And where has it taken you so far in your life? What have you noticed more about yourself as you continue to talk about God and these stories and what he's doing in your life and the people that you have on your show as well?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the last part of that question first, and I've kind of done a spoiler of that already because the Lord has showed me that, again, there is nothing in my life that I have done that he cannot redeem and restore. and use to his glory. So I would not be where I am right now if it weren't for my podcast. I 100% believe that. And not only do I believe that he has touched me spiritually through the work that I've put into the podcast, but I also believe that my writing, my biblical fiction that we talked about before, would not have the depth that it has if the Lord hadn't done work in me. And so I think about this most recent book that I launched, which was only about a month ago. And I have poured so much of myself into the main character of that book. And then to hear back from readers of, I felt everything that she felt. I experienced every raw emotion that she felt. And I celebrated with her by the end of the book. That wouldn't have happened if the Lord had not prompted me to start this podcast a year and a half ago and had not worked with me through a lot of the hard stuff to get there. So from that perspective, he's done an amazing work with me. And I think I told you earlier offline, I never expected that to happen. The reason that I started God's Power Stories is because I knew that God was still at work. But there's a lot of yucky stuff in life right now that I think that it's easy to get our eyes off of God.
Yeah.
But I felt like if we could have a podcast that talked about God's love and God's power, we would begin to see it for ourselves. All the listeners who would be listening would be able to start identifying God's power in their own life. I mean, if you think about trying to, let's say, buy a new car, and maybe you do the research and you're looking at all these cars online, or whatever the case may be, you're asking friends, what cars do you think are good, or whatever the case may be, and you finally settle in on a car and you think, man, nobody has this car, I've never even seen it before, it's gorgeous, and I'm going to be the only person around that has this car, and no sooner pull out of the parking lot that there's another one passing you that's the exact same color, exact same make, exact same model, and you think, oh, it was there all along, I just wasn't seeing it. Well, it's kind of the same way with God. When we start immersing ourselves in the power of God and begin to connect with his love through that power, we begin to see it all over the place. And so that's really why I wanted to start that whole idea about podcasting.
Oh, that was really wonderfully put. So to see kind of that in other people's stories as well.
Absolutely.
As you highlight it. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So of course, through your biblical fiction and through your podcast and, through your early childhood creativity spurts, a creative output has been quite beneficial to your life and your relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Do you feel, and this is more of just a generic question, just for me, do you feel that everyone has a creative output in life for that? Or do you feel like only some people do?
I absolutely believe that we all have it. I think we probably have different levels of it. And I think it may manifest in different ways. But if we think about the fact that we're kids of God and God is the creator, he wouldn't have not put his creative gene in each of us.
Right. Yeah. Yep, just in different variants and ways and formats. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think creativity for me has just done tremendous wonders. Finding a way to unleash your personalization on something, to unleash your print on something, it feels really good because who created that print? God. Yep. And so you're allowing your print, you're allowing God to flow through you into different areas of life, mm-hmm. into different attributes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. I think creativity is very, very important. And I think people have it to different levels and people have it in different categories. Some people are more of the writers and maybe some people are more of, they make art or there's just so many different forms that you can unleash that creative juice, that creative energy, I guess you would say.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah, I love it. Well, definitely highly recommend people to check out God's Power Stories, and we will talk about that a little later as well. But that is beautiful. And then let's see, on the topic of God's Power Stories, and I'm assuming you've done a fair amount of episodes, so far.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most powerful God story you've ever heard on the podcast or in your own life? And I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Yeah.
If it's on the podcast, mention that. If it's in person, you just heard a crazy story, you can talk about that as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I have heard so many wonderful stories on God's Power Stories, and there have been a lot of guests that I've known. I've known the people very well, and then they get on my podcast and they tell me some story that blows me away, that I never knew about them. I never knew that God met them in that way, and it was just amazing. But just thinking about that question, listeners may not know, but I just got back from what was called a Revelation tour with, they might know the name Jonathan Cahn. And he's written several books. He's a Messianic Jew. He has a church in New Jersey. He travels all over the world, proclaiming the goodness of God. And he's very prophetic also. So to be able to go on this trip with him was kind of like a chance in a lifetime for my husband and me. And part of the trip was getting on a cruise ship to go to the Isle of Patmos. We flew over to Turkey. We spent several days in Turkey, and then we took this boat to the Isle of Patmos, which is where the book of Revelation was written by John. So we get on this boat, and my husband and I had never taken a cruise before. And it was only a 2-day cruise. So it probably wasn't anywhere near as fancy maybe as a lot of people have taken cruises. But when we sat on that boat, I think it was within the first couple of hours of being there, this story came to me. And it was a story that I heard as a child by a pastor. I cannot tell you which pastor it was. I can't even tell you everything about the message, but I remember this story. And as I told my husband this story, I began to cry. So clearly it had an impact on me and has had an impact on me for years. And so I really hope and pray that it has the impact on maybe even just one listener or one viewer for this episode. But it was told to me when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, cruising was a very new thing. It was very expensive to cruise. You didn't know anybody who had ever taken a cruise before. It was very kind of like the new thing to do. And this pastor was telling this story about this man who was getting up in age, but had saved his whole life to go on a cruise. And he had just planned and was very excited about it, but it took everything he had to be able to scrimp together the money to be able to go on this cruise. So he goes on the cruise. He begins to meet people, and people are like, hey, we're going to lunch. Do you want to go with us? And he's like, no, I'll be fine. And he would go back to his room, and they might see him later on in the day. Oh, we're going to dinner. Oh, no, don't worry about me. He does this the entire cruise, whether it be a 5-day cruise, 7-day cruise, 10-day cruise. He does it the entire time. They're debarking. What do they call it when you get off the boat? Anyway, they're getting off the boat for the end of the cruise. And they said, we've seen you many times during this cruise, but, every time we asked you to come and eat, you never wanted to come, and we never saw you during the meal. Like, where were you? What were you doing? And he said, this cruise took everything I could scrape together financially in order to come. And the thought of spending money on food, I just didn't have it. So I was smart before I came on this cruise, and I made a whole bunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I've just been eating the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches all during this cruise because I couldn't afford the meals. And they looked at him and they said, The meals were included. You didn't have to pay a thing.
Oh, no. Oh.
And it was like, how often do we do that as Christians, where God has set this table for us? And we're okay to say, I'm saved. I'm going to heaven, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But what are we missing that God has for us simply because we're satisfied with this?
Wow.
And that story has obviously stayed with me for all these years.
Yeah.
And I just hope, and I just think it's very interesting that you asked that question, and that story is fresh on my mind, that I just hope and I pray that it ministers to somebody who's listening to this podcast.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful. Because it's like you pray and you ask for things and you live your life in a powerful way because you have a powerful God.
Yes.
You don't, that's why. That's your table, because he is powerful. Mm-hmm. He will provide. He will allow you to do said thing. He will allow your dreams to come true. Maybe not on your exact time frame, maybe not on the exact ways that you thought, but don't settle. Yeah, don't settle. Live the life that God has for you.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to keep seeking until you find out the entirety of that life path. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. What a story. All right, well let's do a few more and then we will slowly close out. Oh, that was powerful. Powerful, Anna. Very, very powerful. Okay. So now we're going to segue a little bit outside. So for someone listening right now, and of course you just gave them a very powerful story, but for someone who is listening who isn't a Christian and who maybe they're curious, maybe they're skeptical, maybe they've had their fair share of bad influence in their life that has led them away from the Christian faith, what would you say to them if they came to you and they told you, well, hey, this is why I don't follow Christianity. My family was hypocritical. They acted and they would say that they're Christians, but they didn't act like it, blah, 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 blah. They give you their list of reasons. I dealt with suffering. My father passed through addiction, which was personally something I went through. What would you say to them if they just hit you with all the issues that they're going through, and that is their reason on why they don't have a relationship with God? Because they feel in probably some way that God has done them and their life wrong. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that person?
I get that. I get that sometimes in life, circumstances happen. People are in our lives that don't represent God well. There are hardships in our lives that feel impossible to overcome. But God, in his very essence, is love. And whether you choose to accept him or not, it doesn't change who he is. And it doesn't change his essence. And it doesn't change his earnest desire to call you his child. Until you don't have a breath left in your body, he's going to be calling you. He's going to be wooing you. None of us fully understand God. None of us are ever going to feel like we've got the corner on who God is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change his love for us. It doesn't change his plan for us. It doesn't change his passion and his desire to have a relationship with you. And so I just would pray that you take a chance He's got his hand held out for you. He is smiling at you. No matter what you've done, it's not too big for him to cover it with the blood of his one and only son that he sent to die for you. So I just ask you to take that chance. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Right. But hardship, but hurt, but pain, but shame.
Right.
Give him a chance.
Yeah. Oh, amen. Amen. Oh, just gives me chills. Gives me absolute chills. Wow. And you know, I just want to add something to that, Anna. This world, you know, that we live in is temporary. This world that we are living in is temporary. And there is an eternity that awaits us. And where we spend that eternity is up to what we do here in this temporary world. Hell is not a bunch of fire and scary dark mountains and, you know, eerie. No, hell is away from Jesus. Hell is being away from God. It's being away from love. It's being in that hate, in that dark despair of negativity. You want to be eaten alive by something, it's negativity that will get you. That's what will get you. It will get every part of your life, you know? And so it's choose wisely what you do and how you live your temporary world life. And please do it lovingly with the Father who created you, who wants to have that eternal relationship with you in heaven. Do not push away from your Heavenly Father and find yourself in an eternity away from love. An eternity away from love. That is scary to me. Because we all know what love feels like. We've all felt love. We've all been blessed in many different aspects. So, thank you for that, Anna. Thank you so much. Anna, you are also a creator on Act Social. What drew you to Act Social as a platform, and what would you recommend to other Christian creators and Christians out there who enjoy Christian content?
I don't know how, but somehow I got an email. I think it was when Act Social was just starting out that said, we have this platform called Act Social. And that was the first time that I had heard about it. And I love the premise of Act Social. I tell people it's kind of like the people of Acts in the book of Acts, where the church was just getting started and they were there for each other and they were giving to one another as they had need, and they were praying together and they were gathering together and stuff like that. That's what I think of when I think of Acts Social. It's a platform that's designed to be with and for other believers or people who are wondering what this whole God thing is all about, what this whole Christianity thing is all about. Yeah. So that's what I think of when I think of Act Social. And I don't feel yet that I've really scratched the surface on what Act Social has to offer. So I can look forward to continuing to go down that journey. But I know that I was able to really easily pump in my podcast episodes so that as new podcast episodes are dropped, anybody who's on Act Social can see that and hopefully get a chance to also listen in like you have. It's been really interesting just in preparing for this interview. It's, I guess, in a way, God's Power Stories is kind of like my own little mission field. I'm up to 76 countries that people have downloaded episodes in. And I didn't realize that. The last time that I looked at it was probably closer to the beginning of the year. I was in about 50 countries, which I was praising God for that. But 76.
Isn't that just impressive?
76 countries, yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And who knows how many of those people came from Act Social. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was a big part of the mission of Act Social, was to give people like yourself who maybe aren't your quote unquote pastors, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have their own church, like physical church, and they're not located in a specific city, but they're people like you who have stories, who have these experiences, who have these gifts and these relationships with God that are just, if not even more impactful than your normal, pastors and people like that as well. It's like we all have a voice, and that's something that social media has taught us as a general scheme, that everyone's got a voice. And what Act Social does is it highlights the Christian voices. Let's highlight the Christians. Let's highlight their stories and their messages and their values as well, because they're just as important, and to be quite frank with you, it's many times, at least for me, that I find myself relating more personally to people with not so big of a following, or with people who don't have their own mega church, $1 million, multi-million, mega dollar church. I find myself relating to more of your people, like people who've just lived those normal lives, but they've gone through things that we can actually relate to, that I can look at you and be like, I understand that. Like, I'm actually going through that right now, or I just got out of a chapter like that, or, my mom's going through something similar to that, or, just that relatability, I think, has been a big driving point for Act Social, just being able to relate to one another and to create that digital sanctuary for people like me and you and many others to tell our stories and to help each other out along our journeys of faith. So we are so grateful to have you on the platform. And of course, that's another avenue that people can check out more of your stuff on as well. Leading on top of that, how do you feel about the importance of that digital sanctuary? Because we have such a tech-filled world where people are just always on their phone, always on a laptop, computer, iPad, some sort of screen is probably in front of their face. How important is it to have that sanctuary online for God and for Christianity? Do you feel?
I think it's very, very important. I mean, going back to the story that I had told early on, and being in college so far away and feeling so isolated and feeling so alone, I think if you go on a lot of other social media platforms, you can feel like that pretty quickly. You're comparing yourself to other people. You're feeling like you're not measuring up. You're getting a lot of blat about this negative thing and that negative thing and things that you don't agree with. And you're getting unfriended by people and all those types of things that aren't honoring to your own life, let alone honoring to God. But to be able to have a platform where you can come and know that you can, find out about podcast episodes that are going to be uplifting and going to be glorifying to God, to go on somebody's reel or story and hear them praying for the people that are watching them that very moment, those types of things. It's like no matter how dire your situation is, that church, it's almost like a representation of the church universal, that you can know that you can go there at any time and that you're going to find content that's going to uplift you and going to glorify God.
Yeah.
It's like your safe place.
Exactly. And what a tool to have in a world full of spiritual warfare, in a world where they want you scrolling brainlessly on TikTok and on these reels and these short form videos and some of the things that they're pushing your way for you to consume, to nudity, negativity, to the just so much corruption for your mind, corruption for your brain chemistry. and they're constantly just pushing it at you, and Act Social goes the other way. It pushes that stuff away from you and only keeps that valuable stuff at you, and just what a beautiful thing to have a platform, to be a part of a platform that actually cares about your health and your mental health and actually wants you to, when you are done with being on Act Social and scrolling or posting or whatever you did, that you feel inspired, fulfilled, energized. You feel life within you, the Word of God within you. You feel that energy. Whereas any other normal social media, you don't feel that. You feel drained. You feel just like, what did I just expose myself to? Like, what did I just take in to my mind, consistently? I mean, like, it is. So that's definitely, it's been a big push for Act Social, trying to just open those doors for more people. And like I said, we're just so grateful to have you on and to give people access to wonderful people like yourself and your stories. So it's just beautiful.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all you do there and the whole team at Act Social. You didn't have to follow God's lead with regard to this, but you did. The founder did. And, look what's happening. Look how God's name is being glorified through it.
Yeah. It truly does. It feels like a God-breathed platform. It really does. I think my CEO says it the best. I know I just called him the CEO, but what he likes to say is God is our founder. He likes to say that he's the CEO. He'll do the business stuff, whatever needs to be done. But God is our founder. That God is the creator of this idea. It's not ours. This is not our project. This isn't our platform. This is God's platform. And let's treat it like that,
Beautiful.
But all right, so final two questions, closing out, and then we'll call it. It's been just lovely though. You said your only obligation is obedience towards God's direction, that He will take care of the rest. What has that looked like in your life when obedience was costly, but you still had to carry on and continue doing what was right?
Yeah.
Obedience is very hard.
Yeah.
Very difficult. And walking our quote unquote narrow path can drive a lot of people away. Coming back to they feel like they're not enough. They feel like they're not doing things properly. They feel like they're not doing what God is wanting them to do. So they feel like they're letting Him down, so they push away.
Yeah.
How do you counter that? How do you counter that walk with obedience when it's difficult?
Well, it's very difficult to do because, again, in the natural versus the supernatural, when you look at results from the natural perspective, take into account when I started to write full time and started to do the podcast and everything, I was kind of like at the height of where I wanted to be in the traditional business world. I was an HR professional, had been an HR professional for a number of years and had really worked my way up, and was in a position that I really loved for a company that I was really proud of. But it was in the midst of a training event that we were doing, and I was a student. All of our leaders within our organization were students for this, I want to say 5-day training. And it was all done online and all that kind of stuff because we had multiple locations. But I was thinking about everything for work, but I was also thinking about everything that I felt like the Lord had on my heart for the writing and the communicating. And was having sidebar conversations with God throughout this training, and kept saying to God, well, I want to do what the company needs me to do because I believe in what I'm learning here in this training. But with regard to the writing, and I kept kind of going back and, kept trying to have these conversations with God, and God did stop me. And it wasn't an audible voice, but it was such a clear impression on me that He said, look, I have set the table for you. It is time for you to come and dine. So again, going back to that illustration, it's weird how those kind of connect. But I didn't really realize what that meant at first. And my first thought was, is he asking me to leave my job?
Yeah.
And I prayed about it and talked to my husband about it and talked to my daughter about it and kind of, I think he wants me to leave my job.
Yeah.
And how am I going to do that? I got a long way before Social Security kicks in.
Yeah. There's world logic and God logic.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know what, though? I put my hand in his, and I let him lead me out of what a lot of people would call a dream job.
Wow.
So that I could write full time. Now, in my mind, the result side of it, the natural part of it is, okay, God must have planned that I'm going to be making 6 figures from my writing because, he just led me out of this dream job to be able to pursue this thing this call really that he's had on my life, my entire life, is to write and communicate his glory to other people. Mm-hmm. So he's going to financially bless me. I'm never going to have to worry about a thing.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. He didn't do that. But what he did do was his grace was sufficient. Yeah. And my husband and I have never gone without a meal over these last 3 years. Yeah. He has made a way for us. I can't put it on paper because it doesn't make sense in the natural. Yeah. But in the supernatural, we have everything we need. He has met every need that we've had. Yeah. So obedience was me saying yes to him without knowing what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah.
And just relying on him for the results.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. And trusting that even though the money goes away, things decrease, that you're still going to be okay.
Yep.
I have to ask one more question on top of this. For a Christian watching this video, what is the importance of having a kingdom spouse?
Oh, yeah. I'm so blessed to have my husband. So blessed to know that he's got my back no matter what crazy idea that, God asked me to pursue, that he's going to say, you know what, if God is in it, yes, I am for you doing that. At the same time, I know that if there's a listener on this call or watching this video, that they might say, well, I don't have that. Either I'm single or my husband, or my wife or whatever the case may be, doesn't have my back with regard to that. God will make a way there as well. But I can just speak from my own personal experience and to say it is everything to me that my spouse, has my back the way that he does. When I was in the traditional work world, I would get frustrated on so many things and come home and say, oh, and then this happened and then that happened. And John would always stop and say, you got to remember who you're working for. And that's all he had to say. And it was as if it was inspired by God himself. Because when you can remember that I am doing what God has asked me to do, it doesn't really matter what any man has to say. My daddy is pleased with my obedience. And that's what I'm going to rest in.
Yeah. Well, and good job, faithful servant. Wow. Oh, how beautiful. I love it. Well, Anna, I think that about wraps up our podcast for today.
Already?
I know. It was a quicker one. Where can people find your books, your podcast, anything that you're currently working on? Where can they find Anna Moore Bradfield?
Yeah, well, my website is called Anna Moore Bradfield, so you can go there. I have a Facebook page, Anna Moore Bradfield author. The Instagram is Anna Moore Bradfield, so you can find me in all those places. Obviously, Act Social you can find me on. So my books are all on Amazon, so you can find them there as well as my website. Would just love for people to just take advantage of these things that God is downloading into me and putting into the podcast, putting into the books. Again, the podcast is called God's Power Story, so you can find it on any platform that you listen to podcasts.
Oh, I love it. Well, and I will also link down below in the description all of Anna's links for her website, for the Amazon link to her books, and all that fun stuff below. So once again, Anna, thank you so much for this blessing to have you on the podcast. And we pray that this can help some of the viewers watching and can give you guys some value and some love in your walk with the Lord as well.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.